Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen. This is Seconds Out. Got an update on the Dillian Whyte situation that I posted about yesterday. Promised I would keep you all updated, and the official statement came through relatively late last night, so I've waited until the morning to kind of process it all, and I'll read from it in a minute, which may look a bit clunky on screen, but I think it's important I don't misquote anyone, not least because I can't afford to be sued, as you might have seen from the background. So Dillian Whyte has been officially ruled out of his fight with Otto Wallin, scheduled for next week, October 30th, at the O2. It was in a defence of his WBC interim heavyweight title. And apparently after consultation with a specialist, his shoulder will not be fit to hold up to the rigours of the fight, or the rest of the training camp, presumably. So that fight has been cancelled, but the show will go ahead, the full undercard. Chantelle Cameron's light welterweight or super lightweight unification fight with Mary McGee will now top the bill, and various fighters on the undercard, Alan Babich being one of them against Eric Moliner, Yusuf Kamari, who else, just off the top of my head, Eddie Scotney, of course, much awaited or long awaited return to the ring. So let me just read from this Matchroom statement, and it says, a shoulder injury has forced Dillian Whyte to cancel. Now note the word cancel for everyone talking about the fight being rescheduled. If the plan was to reschedule it, surely it would say postpone, or at least if they wanted to guarantee in public that they were planning to reschedule it, it would say postpone, not cancel. Cancel his interim WBC heavyweight world title defence against Sweden's Otto Wallin, scheduled for the O2 in London on Saturday, October the 30th. Now, I'll go into more detail in a minute, but what disappointed me about this statement was that there is no apology to Wallin anywhere to be found, and no real kind of sympathy or empathy for him about all the hard work, expenses, and everything else that have gone into his long training camp, fully with the expectation that he would be rewarded with a headline show at the O2 and the payday that goes with it. So then it talks about the undercard fights, of course, which are now, one of them at least, is not an undercard fight anymore. Whyte says he was planning to knock Wallin out and guarantees he would have done so in the first half of the fight. Definitely don't see that happening, even if the fight had gone ahead, regardless of any shoulder injury. Wallin's proved to be a very sturdy operator and technically skilled, physically strong. So even if Whyte had won within the distance, the first half of the fight seems fanciful at best. But this is the specific bit about the shoulder. Dillian Whyte's physician and leading sports and exercise medicine consultant, Dr. Harjinder Singh, said, Dillian sustained a shoulder injury during training in preparation for his planned fight on October 30th, 2021, which I have assessed and confirmed with diagnostic imaging. So the injury's been confirmed by a specialist, which is great, although there's no detail on what the actual injury is. Now, I know the baying hordes on Twitter who are talking about conspiracy theories, and we'll discuss that a little bit in a minute, would like to see a copy of his MRI scan, for example. I think that's probably asking too much. I'm not sure we as fans have the right to ask for that level of evidence. But it would have been nice, for me at least, to see the detailed diagnosis of the injury rather than just a shoulder injury. So Dr. Singh goes on, I have treated the injury, but the injury will unfortunately prevent him from fighting on October 30th, 2021. With immediate rest, physiotherapy and rehabilitation, there should be no enduring concerns. Now, there's comments after that from Eddie Hearn and Joe Markowski of The Zone, neither of which mention Wallin, and Eddie Hearn's tweet about the subject, which was quickly buried by the confirmation of the date and venue for Teofimo Lopez against George Kambosos Jr. In fact, if you go on Hearn's Twitter, you have to scroll down through about 8 Lopez Kambosos related tweets to get to the announcement that Whyte is out, and yeah, no, Wallin's name is nowhere to be seen in that tweet. So it's all, I think it could have been done in a much more classy manner. Obviously, they did tell Wallin not to get on the plane. He was due to fly out yesterday, so kind of opportune timing in a way. I mean, I'm sure he would much rather have the fight, but at least he didn't get on the plane and travel over to here, adjust to the time zone, and then find out the fight was off. So yeah, I mean, we hope to catch up with him at some point. I know Wallin's promoter, Dimitri Salita, has been doing the rounds. We didn't speak to him yesterday because I saw that he'd already done a couple of the other YouTube channels, and I wasn't sure there'd be much new we could offer from his perspective. But he's not happy, as you would imagine, about the fight being cancelled, and has called on the WBC to stipulate that Whyte must beat Wallin to guarantee his mandatory WBC world title shot against Tyson Fury. WBC mandated previously that if a fight between Fury and Alexander Usyk, a unification contest for all 4 major belts, could not be agreed, then the next fight for Fury would have to be against his WBC mandatory. And they stipulated that it would be whoever is the WBC interim champion at that time. It's currently Dillian Whyte. Now he's not fighting. It will definitely be Dillian Whyte. So there's no mention of Whyte having to get past Wallin to guarantee that shot at Fury. And this is what's caused a lot of the suspicions and speculation on Twitter and other social media platforms, in that Whyte facing for some people, a risky fight against Wallin now has averted that risk for whatever reason, shoulder injury, and will now presumably head directly into Fury as his next fight without having to get past Wallin first. And this has led to Wallin's camp, or Salita specifically, and many fans speculating that perhaps the Matchroom and Whyte had sufficient motivation to pull out of the fight. Now, I understand the suspicions and where they've come from. You know, Wallin for me was always a very risky fight for Whyte, and once the WBC made their proclamation, it seemed crazy that Whyte would go ahead with any sort of risk with a huge money fight on the table against Fury and that world title shot that he's clamoured for so long. Having said that, and having spoken to Whyte's trainer, Xavier Miller, some of Whyte's training partners, including Kay Prosper, who was out in Portugal with him, and you'll see on the channel Dempsey McKean, who was one of Whyte's main sparring partners in the last few weeks, all indications are that he was in incredible shape, was training really hard. And you don't go out to Portugal, sacrifice your life, move away from London for 12 weeks and pay at your own expense for sparring partners, good quality sparring to come in and do all of that stuff. And I'm sure that camp in Portugal is not cheap either, if you always had the intention of pulling out. So even from a cynical, pragmatic, commercial perspective, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Although the WBC edict came out a lot later than when training camp would have started. And I know people like to say there's no smoke without fire, but there's no tangible evidence. You know, as much as there's circumstantial stuff and you think, well, logically, there's nothing physical evidence or verbal or anything like that to suggest that Whyte is anything other than injured. And we should make that clear. But yeah, I do hope to speak to Wallin or a member of his team at some point over the next couple of days. Obviously, it'd be great to speak to Whyte as well. We're waiting for him to issue his own statement. But I don't expect the fight to be rescheduled. I don't expect the WBC to force Whyte to reschedule it either. Nor should they, really, because their original edict is still being upheld. So there's no reason for them to even get involved, as much as Salita would like that to happen. I do feel, of course, for Wallin, great guy, friend of the channel. I'm actually very good friends with his manager, Zach Levin. We used to work together at Boxing News. So very disappointed for those guys. I gave Wallin a real shot in the fight as well. So it's gutting for him. But I just think it's one of those things where everything will move on, and this will unfortunately, but rather quickly, get forgotten about, especially if the build-up to Fury against Whyte starts in the way I expect it to. But moving on to the card, Chantelle Cameron now under the spotlight, if you like. She was desperate for the show not to be cancelled, so I'm sure she's delighted, not only to still be on the show, but also to be now top of the bill as a prelude to a potential undisputed title fight at the weight if she beats Mary McGee and becomes a unified champion. And while I don't think the undercard's particularly strong, and this highlights the need for stacked undercards in the way the Liverpool show was stacked most recently, because then there would have been a choice of strong fights to step into that main event breach. In the same way that I suppose Sky, when Eubank's fight fell through at Wembley, they were able to put Avanesi and Taylor, not the best fight, of course, but still a European title fight to fill that main event slot. And I know people say, well, it's a world title unification. Surely that trumps a European title fight. And it does, but I'm not sure Cameron or McGee have that kind of crossover name value. I think the majority of people who are offered the option of refunds, which is indicated in the statement that you can get refunds at the point of purchase. The majority will probably take that up. I don't expect it to be anywhere near a sellout at the O2 now. But I think the new main event should be entertaining. I think there's plenty of talent on the undercard, just not necessarily in competitive fights. Despite the admirable offer from heavyweight Johnny Fisher to step in with Wallin on very short notice. But that seems like a fight where there's not a lot to gain for Wallin, and I don't expect that to happen. However, let's make the best of it. It's one of my rare child-free weekends next week. My son's at his mum's. I was always planning to go to this show. I'm not going to cancel the plans now. I'm still, I love boxing, so I'm sure I'm still going to enjoy the show. It's just disappointing because I thought the main event was one of the better UK fights of the year on paper. So that's the update. I expect these comments to be filled with people who doubt Whyte's injury because there were plenty yesterday. And I understand where they're coming from. But until there's any solid evidence to the contrary, I think we have to take him and his surgeon and everyone around him at their word. So yeah, thanks for listening. I'll respond to some of the comments and I'll see you all soon. Cheers.